So we are here today with Rodney Davis, the Republican incumbent for the 13th Congressional District. We appreciate you being here today and invite you to start by providing an opening statement as to why you think you deserve another term in office.
Well, first off, thank you to the editorial board and to the SJR for always being available when we wanted to come in and discuss issues and be able to sit down and answer any questions that you'd like to throw at me or talk about what's happening in Washington, D.C. So having this opportunity once again is a privilege for us, too. So thank you. I got elected to this position right now 5.5 years ago. It seems like yesterday I sat in this room and talked about what I wanted to accomplish as a brand new member of Congress. And I sat in this room and said, I want to go pass a long-term highway bill. I want to address infrastructure needs, water infrastructure needs. I want to continue to lead Washington in a bipartisan way to address infrastructure investment. While we haven't accomplished as much as what I want on the infrastructure front, I believe that there's a path forward working with the Trump administration to do more, but we cannot forget what we've already done. Look at the progress that's been made on the high-speed rail corridor, and let's ensure that we continue to move progress forward by investing billions of dollars that we already have. Also, we've invested historic amounts of dollars in NIH research. That includes research for pediatric cancer, ALS, many other diseases that are ravaging our communities. And I also want to say that I pledged to work on local issues that were important to our communities. And one that I'm very proud of is working with the local NAACP, working with local officials to ensure that the artifacts that were found relating to the 1908 race riots get their display that they deserve in Washington, D.C. through the Library of Congress. Proud to work with local officials on a wide variety of issues, and these are just a few things I promised to do when I got to Washington that we have accomplished.
Okay. Thank you.
So, as we get started, I'd like to ask, so you're a Republican. So how'd you come to that? That's the first part. How'd you get to be a Republican? What are a couple of principles that kind of reflect that? And how do those play out in your time in Congress?
Well, I grew up in the 80s. I'm a child of the Reagan Revolution. I'm somebody who watched our economy grow under the Republican President Ronald Reagan. But a lot of my political upbringing goes back to my parents. My parents were conservative Republicans. They taught me that decisions in Washington and decisions in Springfield actually had an impact on the way they ran their business in Taylorville. That led me to the Republican principles of lower taxes, more personal liberties, and personal responsibilities. And what we've tried to do is make sure in Washington that we move those principles forward. We passed historic tax reform. This is the first reform to our tax code that we've had in 30-plus years. The last time that it was done was 1986 when I was 16 and I had a great mullet and a mustache cruising the square in Taylorville. I promised to do this when I first ran for Congress, and we were able to get it done. And the results of these policies, the results of lower taxes has led to historic economic growth and historic low unemployment, to where now we're talking about making sure that we invest in the skills and the education and training that's necessary for individuals stuck in the cycle of poverty to go get jobs that we know are available, and not just any job, good paying jobs that are even available in the rural parts of my district. That's the area I grew up in, and I see the positive impact of conservative fiscal policies that led me to be a member of the Republican Party.
Elaborate, if you would, a little bit more about the tax overhaul plan, specifically here in the district. What positive impacts are you seeing?
Well, you have to look at the overall economic growth that we're experiencing. Even there were many naysayers that said there's no way that the president and the Republicans in Congress would ever reach the estimated 3% average quarterly growth. Well, we've exceeded that. We have more jobs available than Americans looking for jobs. And when you see how we can change the tax code to even put more money in the pockets of middle income and lower income families, that's a net positive for the people that I represent. The overall highest percentage of tax relief is going to middle income families. But you'll hear the Democrats demagogue the issue saying that we only cut taxes for the wealthy. The facts just don't bear that out. The citizens in my district that get an average of $2,000 more in their family budget, to them, that's not crumbs. That's $2,000 that they can then spend on their family. They can make their own decisions to go on vacation. They can make their own decisions to go invest in a 401k, invest in a vehicle, and send their kids to college. But the bottom line, it's their money. And by lowering taxes, we've seen the revised estimates of the deficit projection that tax cuts would create go from 1.5 trillion. Now they're saying 1.1 trillion has basically been paid for by economic growth. We chose growth in Washington. That's a conservative fiscal Republican policy position. And with Republicans in control of the House, the Senate, and the White House, we were able to accomplish this. And you look at tax relief and the tax cut bill. There were things I had to fight for that didn't get put into the House bill. One was very important to the colleges that I represent. Many families and many students were relying upon tuition waivers to be able to reduce the amount that they have to borrow to get their college education. We fought for a provision in the conference report that would still allow these tuition waivers to be considered non-taxable. And it's not just about the students who are there getting their tuition waivers and reducing their cost of education. It's about the families at institutions like my alma mater, Millikan University, where you have families that have a family member that work at that college for their entire career to be able to send their kids there for that tuition waiver. How in the world can we as a federal government look them straight in the eye and say, we're going to change the rules 17 years in? And I made sure I made that argument to our Ways and Means Committee Chairman Kevin Brady, to our leadership team, and that provision was changed in the conference report, I'm proud to say, because of our leadership.
So I know people's eyes glaze over when we start talking about trillions, but is there a source for your suggestion that 1.1 trillion has already been wiped out of the 1.5?
The Congressional Budget Office has revised their estimates, and we can get you a copy of a recently run op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, too.
Okay.
With the tax overhaul, is there more work to be done? And if so, what would you be advocating for if given another term?
Absolutely, there is, and thank you for asking that question, because just recently we reintroduced a bill that would make the individual rates permanent. That is an idea that once the initial tax bill was signed into law, I remember picking up my cell phone and texting my good friend Steve Scalise saying, I'd like to lead the bill that makes the individual rates permanent. And it was right after I saw many Democratic senators get on TV and say the reason they voted against our tax overhaul that has led to historic economic growth, historic low unemployment, and more money in the pockets of the families I serve, they said they voted against it because individual tax rates weren't permanent. Well, I didn't have the ability to call into that program and remind our Democratic senators that the individual rates were permanent when that bill left the House. But because of parliamentary rules, it needed 8 Democrats to be able to keep that provision under what they call the reconciliation provisions, and we didn't get that. Now we're going to get a chance to make those rates permanent instead of expiring in 2025, I believe, and that gives us a chance to do what we promised to do in the House, and that's my bill. I'm going to continue to lead on that. We're going to continue to be attacked by the other side for wanting to make these rates permanent, but the proof is in the pudding with economic growth and low unemployment right now, much higher economic growth than what was anticipated even by our side who pushed the tax cut bill.
The national debt still is significant at the moment, and I was reading a recent report from J.P. Morgan that said by the end of this calendar year, the total debt owed by the federal government to outsiders will exceed all debt that U.S. households have for mortgages, credit cards, cars, student loans, and other personal loans. I guess how does the Republican Party, which prides itself on being fiscal conservatives, rack up this type of debt?
Well, economic growth helps us erase much of the provisions too. Look at the recent CBO report on the tax bill. You can see that having substantial economic activity actually brings more dollars into our federal treasury, and that's the growth that we chose. That's the economic policies that we believe are going to help us get our country on the right fiscal track. But it's going to take bipartisanship. Not too long ago, in 1996 and 1997, in the Clinton presidency, we had 10-year budget deficits projected and just overwhelmingly increased debt over the next 10 years. But seemingly overnight, because Republicans and Democrats sat down together in 1997, we had a budget surplus because we passed the Balanced Budget Act of 1997. I wasn't a member of Congress then, but I was pleased with the bipartisanship that we saw exhibited. As a matter of fact, I don't think that the Republicans and Democrats have been able to come together in a bipartisan way to address fiscal issues like they did with that balanced budget agreement since. And I'd like to help lead the charge to make that happen.
Do you think that's possible given today's political climate? I mean, it is very partisan right now in D.C. A lot of votes are taken along party lines on at least some of the more controversial issues. Do you think you can reach that bipartisanship again on issues like regarding finance?
You know, 1997 wasn't that long ago. And you remember that these issues were reached in the midst of an impending impeachment of President Clinton. It's going to take both sides. It's going to take both sides to work together. That's why I'm proud to chair our Republican Main Street Caucus. It's a caucus of 70-plus Republicans that we really want to sit down and work together in a bipartisan way. That's a caucus where we've pushed issues in front of leadership that may make some of my colleagues a little uncomfortable to push. I just had our priority over the next few weeks is ensuring a path to reauthorize a Violence Against Women Act. And I think it's a bill that needs to be reauthorized, does not need to be caught up in partisan politics. I was in Congress the last time it happened in 2013 or 2014 when many Republicans like me voted to reauthorize the program, and it's providing resources to our law enforcement officials and resources to those who need it the most. And those are the types of issues that we tackle that don't make it into the 24-hour news cycle. And frankly, I see a lot of bipartisanship in Washington that doesn't get reported. As a matter of fact, my colleague Jimmy Panetta from Monterey, California, came out into our district just last week, and we talked about how we actually get along and how a majority of what we do in Washington is actually done in an overwhelmingly bipartisan way. It's just the areas that we disagree on get the overwhelming amount of coverage in the 24-hour news cycle. Jimmy was here. We visited 3 high schools, a larger school, a mid-sized school, a small private school, and then also we visited one of our community colleges to talk about workforce investment. Those are the types of relationships that we build in Washington, D.C. when you make the effort to get to know everybody. And I was proud to host Jimmy this past week, and Jimmy was proud to host me back in February out in his district to learn about many of the issues that his farmers face, because they grow a lot different products and produce in the central and northern part of California than we do here. And part of my job is actually working with Jimmy on the House Ag Committee to be able to implement policies that affect my farmers here, but also affect his farmers. And that's how you legislate better, by getting to know everybody else's priorities too.
As we've been talking about, by many measures, the economy is doing quite well right now. Are there any additional changes to current policy regarding the economy you would pursue?
Yeah, we need to get a handle on reprioritizing how we spend money in Washington, D.C. That means making sure that we protect Social Security and Medicare and programs for those families who rely upon those dollars right now. But we also have to look ahead at the impending insolvency of both of those programs and protect them for future generations, our kids, our grandkids. And those are the types of decisions that are going to take bipartisanship, not just rhetoric from one side or the other. They're going to take working together and getting things done so that we truly can reprioritize how Washington spends money rather than just going on autopilot. And I'll remind you and your viewers and your readers that right now, upwards of 65 to 75% of our budget is what we call mandatory spending. So when we have fights about end-of-the-year spending deals, it's really at about 30 to 35% of our budget. And that's the discretionary side. That includes national defense. That includes national institutes of health. That includes education. So we've got to do something to make sure that we work together in a bipartisan way to keep Social Security and Medicare for those who are on it and who are about to go on it, and ensure that it's there for future generations instead of letting it get stuck in the political rhetoric of the gamesmanship that we see today in today's polarized environment.
What approaches do you favor on that?
Well, I've said we've got to open that debate again. I've thrown out the idea that Bill Gates doesn't need Social Security, and I'm sure to make the system more solvent for those who need it the most, Bill Gates would be more than willing to give up his Social Security benefits. But I want to hear ideas. And what I don't hear in Washington enough are bipartisan ideas to fix the fiscal problems in D.C. What I hear is the political rhetoric from the far right and the far left.
Are there any, though, ideas that you favor that are out there?
Well, that's one right now.
The Bill Gates,
let's have a means test on Social Security benefits. Let's look at the opportunity to ensure that we save Social Security and Medicare for future generations, and engage in the process a new debate. But it's going to take bipartisanship.
Okay. Trade is a vital part of the economy, and trade agreements have certainly been discussed over the last year. What type of trade agreements would you like to see with other countries?
Well, I'd like to continue to see a successful trilateral agreement within North America. But I don't think anybody's surprised that this administration has taken a different approach to trade. This is exactly what President Trump said when he was going to do when he was campaigning. And I don't think we can rewrite history to think that a Clinton presidency would have offered much different trade aspects. Matter of fact, both President Trump and candidate Clinton said they were going to pull out of the TPP, which could have opened up many markets in the South Pacific for many of our agriculture and manufacturing products. But we need to see success, and we need to see results from this administration when it comes to the preliminary trade agreements that they've put together. I'm very confident about the preliminary agreement coming out of the EU. I want to see that agreement finalized. I'm very confident in some of the discussions coming out of the preliminary agreement with Mexico, and possibly seeing some success in an agreement with Canada. We need to see results out of this administration. And frankly, many of my farmers in this district, they expect to see results out of the Trump administration too. I'm many times probably more worried about the impact of proposed retaliatory tariffs on our ag producers, more so than some of the producers that I talk with in and around central Illinois. I was recently at one of our state legislators' ag advisory board meetings, recently at another discussion with those who are related to farm credit. So many are producers, but also many are borrowers within the farm credit institution. And I always ask, how many of you will you please raise your hand and show me if you believe that the Trump administration is on the right track and is going to get you a better deal? And an overwhelming majority of hands go up from those who are involved in agriculture. What worries me the most is that we don't have proposed trade deals in place before the next planting season. And I think that the perspective from our local producers may change. And the perspective they're giving me right now is to give the Trump administration an opportunity to get them a better deal.
So do you have some sense of what the end game is, especially relative to China, when it comes to farm products?
Let's not kid ourselves. China hasn't traded fair in not just steel, but agricultural products too. And I certainly would have hoped that the president and his administration would have focused on bad actors like China. But instead, they went a different path. So I believe, to answer your question about the end game, I think you're going to see the end game pretty quickly with the EU. I think we'll see a deal that will allow more agricultural products to go into the EU countries than what we had under previous agreements. I think you'll see agreements come out of Mexico, and I'm also cautiously optimistic about Canada to keep a trilateral agreement in place that will hopefully break down barriers that we currently see under existing trade agreements and open up new markets, because trading with countries like Canada is vitally important to states like Illinois. And then I think you'll see a focus on China and the South Pacific. And I certainly hope the end game is to make sure China trades more fairly. That's the goal. And that's what's happened now with steel. It's not a coincidence that we're seeing steel jobs come back to the southwestern part of my district. I was with President Trump just a few months ago, where we saw 500 steel workers, many of whom didn't have a job months ago, just raucously cheering him on for the policies that he implemented, because somebody finally stood up to China and bad actors who have been dumping steel into our country. And that has national security implications for many of our industries, especially our military complex, too.
So in some of those instances where the president has cited national security, it's kind of a stretch, right? It's a stretch for me to believe that Canada poses a national security threat when it comes to tariffs and other trade restrictions.
Yeah,
Has Congress taken any kind of raise your eyebrow at that or anything?
I certainly have a different opinion than the administration on how to deal with allies and what I consider fair trading partners. I think we can make some fixes to some of the issues that even our ag sector, especially our dairy sector, has with current agreements and possible violations of trade agreements with Canada. But I'm always one to want to work with and reward friends for good behavior and focus on the bad actors like China. This administration's taken a different approach. I certainly would be supportive of efforts put forth by my good friend Jimmy Panetta and my good friend Mike Gallagher that would require national security trade implications and trade decisions to have to come through Congress.
You'd support that?
Yes, I would.
Is there the president yesterday implemented another $200 billion on imports from China? Is there a concern by you that we're going to be in a trade war that will not result in the best results for farmers here in central Illinois because of these tariffs? And I'm pretty sure China said they would retaliate. I mean, are we just going to be going back and forth to we're at the point where everything is coming out of China is on a tariff?
We're already kind of close to that now.
Yeah.
So the answer to your question is yes, I'm very concerned. But which is why I sit down with my producers from all throughout this district, who these retaliatory tariffs will impact the most in their own family budgets. And an overwhelming number of those producers tell me that they believe the Trump administration is going to get them a better deal than what they have now. So I'm taking their advice and giving patience. However, I'm very concerned if this trade disruption and retaliatory tariffs go into next planting season. I think it can have devastating impacts on Illinois agriculture, and I certainly don't want to see the federal government have to offer more packages to help make farmers whole. It's imperative we also pass a farm bill. The farm bill I helped craft 4.5 years ago is now going to expire. I was on the conference committee then that implemented good policies that our farmers have utilized that have saved taxpayers billions of dollars. It was estimated 4.5 years ago that our bill would only save $23 billion in mandatory spending, part of that 65 to 75% of our budget. But in 4.5 years, they came back and revised the estimates and have said we've saved $112 billion. That's what changing words on pieces of paper in Washington, D.C., and that's the impact it can have on middle America when we write good policies. We're in the midst of this debate right now with a conference committee that I'm on again. And it's interesting because the ag side, where we had a lot of gnawing and gnashing of teeth 4.5 years ago, has been pretty bipartisan and calm. We're now fighting on the SNAP side, the food stamp side. And I think we should invest in helping get education and training and skills building classes to those who are stuck in the cycle of poverty in this country.
That was actually my next question, talking about the Farm Bill and what you...
I did not know your questions before.
I'm aware of that. But you are on the conference committee. How's progress coming? Do you think we'll have a Farm Bill by deadline?
You know, it's Washington, D.C., one thing I've learned is they operate on deadlines best. I do believe we can come up with a deal. I think we're close.
Okay.
And frankly, I talked some of my different ideas for compromise and finding that sweet spot, especially when it comes to education and training investment. I talked to our chairman of the House Ag Committee, and also my colleague G.T. Thompson, who's chairman of the Nutrition Subcommittee, about some ideas to propose. And I'm cautiously optimistic those ideas can be proposed and we can find bipartisanship. But the key is 80% of our farm bill is actually the food stamp program. We have, I believe, 9 million more people on food stamps today, when unemployment is between 3.8 and 3.9%, than when unemployment was 9.5%. So over my time in Congress, and even before I got to Congress and was still engaged in public policy, I've been told by Republicans and Democrats both that to get families out of poverty who may be stuck in that cycle, let's invest in education, training, skills building, apprentice programs. And that's exactly what our House bill tries to do. We've invested, and we will invest upwards of $1 billion a year for getting families who are stuck in the cycle of poverty into our community colleges to get training and skills building that they need to get jobs that are available. And we're not just talking about jobs in our urban areas like Springfield, Decatur, Champaign, Bloomington, et cetera. We're talking good paying jobs available in rural America, like my hometown of Taylorville. McLean Trucking, food distribution center that operates in Taylorville. They deliver fast food to fast food restaurants in and around central Illinois and the Midwest. I used to unload those trucks as a teenager. Now, those jobs are available paying $70,000 a year, and you're home almost every night. And one has to get a commercial driver's license to do that. Under the existing system that we have in place right now, under our existing SNAP program, food stamp program, if there was somebody who woke up today and said, I want to take that job, and I'm on food stamps today, and they went to Lincoln Land Community College, they talked with a financial aid advisor, and said, I want to borrow money based on a federally backed program to go get my commercial driver's license, the federally backed student loan program would require them to go to school for 16 weeks. What we want to do is offer more flexibility to be able to allow an existing program. It's called the SNAP Education and Training Program. Illinois already gets $20 million a year under it. We want to see that expand so that we can have our counselors within SNAP, within the state of Illinois, Department of Human Services, say, if you want to go get your commercial driver's license, we can get it done for you in about 4 weeks, 4 to 8 weeks on average. Well, here's the money to go do it. We'll send you to that school. And then in 4 weeks, that individual who is shopping right now for food for their families, wondering what they can and cannot buy with their link card, they go from having to make decisions like that to making $70,000 a year. That's a life-changing moment, not just for the employee, but for their family. And I would argue that those who have been stuck in the cycle of poverty that can get out are going to be the ones who are going to be engaged in helping others get out of poverty more so than others who haven't experienced that. That's what we're trying to do with this bill. You're going to see a debate over work requirements. Work requirements are already the law under Clinton-era bipartisan welfare-to-work programs. It's just that states like Illinois are operating under waivers in 101 of 102 counties. So let's ensure that we not just go back to what we used to have. Let's also invest in historic education and training so that we can get families out of poverty and into jobs that are available. Caterpillar in Decatur, in my district, they made a decision as a company to invest in Decatur when Decatur was experiencing double-digit unemployment. They've gone from 900 to 2,000 jobs. Their biggest concern is not necessarily input costs on the steel that's coming into their plant as much as it is getting people to take jobs at Caterpillar. So that's one of the best paying jobs with the best paying benefits, the best employer-provided health care that we have in this region, and they can't hire enough people. Imagine a few years ago when Decatur, Illinois, and Macon County had double-digit unemployment. If one job would have been posted at CAT, there would have been a line out the door. Now there's no line for many jobs. That's why we have to do something now in government to encourage going back to school, going back to skills building, to be able to go into those jobs. Because if we don't do it now, when unemployment's so low, when will we as a country do it?
So just to clarify, you're saying that the issue with the SNAP program now is that it's not structured to allow the quick turnaround, the 4 weeks?
There's not as much of an investment in that ability to have the quick turnaround. Absolutely.
So it exists, but there's not enough investment?
The SNAP education and training program exists. Absolutely it
Got it.
does. What we envision is having that program be able to utilize more flexibility and to be able to get families who are stuck in poverty to go in, get trained, get the skills building that they need to be able to get jobs that we know are available. So they come in with an immediate skill. We're not trying to take benefits and food away from anyone. We're actually trying to invest in those families who are stuck in that cycle of poverty to be able to get the training they need so that they can walk into a very good paying job. You know, there's going to be a lot of discussion about from those who just talk in heated political partisan rhetoric that we're going to kick families off of food stamps. That is clearly not the case. As a matter of fact, if under our house plan, if you are a single parent with dependent children, if you're disabled, if you're already working 20 hours a week, or if you're that exception that somebody can always come up with, we even exempt 15% of the entire state's SNAP rolls, that the Department of Human Services can say, okay, this may not be good for you, but you can stay on your benefits. We provide that flexibility for exceptions. But 67% of food stamp recipients in the state of Illinois right now are what we consider work-capable adults, 18 to 59, that don't fit any of those exceptions. So again, if we don't do it now when the jobs are available, when will we as a country decide to?
Moving on to healthcare, still a big topic. In your mind, what would be the ideal healthcare system for this country to adopt?
Thank you. My Marco Rubio moment there. No, I'm glad you talk about healthcare, because I think healthcare is the issue that rises to the forefront in the political politics of today, and a lot of misinformation. I mean, the bottom line is we've got to have a system that encourages employers to continue to be able to offer good benefits to their employees. Under Obamacare right now, employers like Caterpillar and employers throughout this country that offer good benefits, many of our labor organizations, many of whom have endorsed me because of my stance against the Cadillac tax, these plans are going to be taxed. The federal government, when they passed Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, they implemented a tax that has not yet been implemented. They approved a tax that has not yet been implemented that's going to punish employers who offer good health benefits to their employees. That just doesn't seem right to me. And when you look at health care in this district, right now, out of the 700,000 people that I represent, half of them get their insurance, over half of them through their employer. Let's encourage that. Let's encourage that system. But we've got to address healthcare affordability and at the same time protect some of the provisions that I believe were good to address in the Affordable Care Act, like covering pre-existing conditions, making sure there's no lifetime caps, making sure that we have an opportunity to allow kids who may not have been able to get the jobs that are available to get health care coverage to remain on their parents' plan until they're 26. These are popular provisions that enjoyed bipartisan support that were part of our Health Care Reform Act that we passed in the House of Representatives. But let's not kid ourselves that the Affordable Care Act is working. Now, Medicaid rolls in this state have grown. They've grown substantially. As a matter of fact, when you look at Illinois' Medicaid population, especially under Medicaid expansion, which is a 95% reimbursement, or 95% reimbursement now, going to 90% reimbursement soon, federal dollars, we still have 44% of all Illinois Medicaid recipients are able-bodied adults aged 19 to 34. Let's do what we can to get them trained and get skills that they need to go get jobs that provide better health care coverage and access. We have a concern right now in the state of Illinois and in this country with the expanding Medicaid rules. Many of those who are on Medicaid don't have access to the health care that they need, and they can't get access to the doctors that are supposed to be there to care for them. So let's make some changes. Now, the biggest problem I have with the Affordable Care Act is that it's left thousands of my constituents behind when it comes to coverage. Remember, in this country today, even under the Affordable Care Act, we have over 29 million people in this country that still don't have health care coverage. Another 31 million people that have coverage that they can't afford to use. And I was recently reminded of this by talking to a good friend of mine at a parade in Hillsborough just a few weeks ago. This was a former Democratic elected official. His wife is a colon cancer survivor, just like my wife. And they have to get their insurance in the private health care market. Their premiums and deductibles are $24,000 a year before they get $1 of coverage outside of screenings and physicals and what have you. That means if his wife was going to be diagnosed again with a reoccurrence of colon cancer, they'd have to reach $24,000 in out-of-pocket expenses before they get $1 of coverage. She has a pre-existing condition, but can't afford to use the health care policy if that pre-existing condition reoccurs. I know there are many families that make health care decisions based upon the coverage that they have for their family because of pre-existing conditions. I don't want anyone to think that we want to take pre-existing condition coverage away. My wife is a 19-year colon cancer survivor. She has a genetic form of colon cancer called Lynch syndrome. That means my family, my kids, the odds are, one if not all, are probably going to be susceptible to that gene. I want to make sure that no family that experienced the same thing my wife experienced has to think about whether or not they can get health care coverage. And that's what we tried to protect with our overhaul of the health care system. We had layers upon layers of pre-existing condition protections. And I voted for that bill. Was it perfect? No. I certainly wish that the late Senator McCain would have voted for the Senate version so that we could have worked out the differences and been able to positively address the healthcare affordability problem that we have in this country.
Do you foresee this being another issue that Congress takes up in the near future? I mean, it kind of was really big last year. Don't really hear about healthcare as much this year.
Well, I think if Nancy Pelosi regains the speakership, that there will not be any drive to address the Affordable Health Care Act. I think she and many of my Democratic colleagues in Washington will do everything they can to protect the status quo, which is not going to help the families. Not going to help the families like the Broadduses that I spoke with, and many thousands of families that I represent here in Central Illinois.
Okay, if Republicans keep the House, you think, though?
I do. I think, well, we've got to address healthcare affordability. We've got to make sure that the Cadillac tax goes away, that punishes employers for offering excellent healthcare benefits to their employees. And we've got to make sure that we get people out of poverty, off of government programs, into skills building, into jobs that are available that provide some of the best healthcare benefits in the world. And we've got to make sure that we address the healthcare affordability issue within our healthcare system. And I believe we can do that and do it in a bipartisan way.
Okay. Moving on to another widely discussed topic, that would be immigration. What changes, if any, would you want to make to the country's immigration policies?
You know, I've sat in this room now for 5.5 years and said the same thing, and I still believe it, that immigration policy has been hijacked by the far right and the far left. Neither the far right and the far left want to solve this problem. And I urge you to look back to July for a prime example of that. We put together what I consider 2 bills that should have garnered bipartisan support, but didn't. Matter of fact, no Democrat voted for either one of those solutions. And many of these provisions that we put in place, especially the second one, which I was most in favor of, addressed many of the issues that Republicans said they wanted addressed and addressed many of the issues that Democrats said they wanted to address on the Republican side. And I completely agree with this assertion. There has got to be a border structure along portions of our southern border. And if not for immigration issues, for drug interdiction. Drugs that are pre-manufactured in Mexico are coming into our country and making their way to rural America and urban America here in central Illinois. So we have got to have a structure along portions of the southern border, and anyone who says we don't is kidding themselves and does not want us to address the scourge of opioids and methamphetamine increased addictions again. So we actually, not only in the second immigration bill called GoodLat 2, that I voted for also, I voted for both of these provisions, or both of these solutions. We not only authorized $25 billion for border structure, we pre-approved appropriations to make it happen. So Republicans said they wanted to build a wall. This was the chance to actually continue the down payment and get it done, to build those structures where we can build a structure. Republicans also said they want to have a more merit-based immigration system. As somebody who was a congressional staffer for 16 years, I used to help people work through the long, arduous, costly process of immigration, legal immigration, through the naturalization process. Anyone who's gone through that says it's got to be changed. This was our chance to change that in this bill. So 2 Republican provisions that many Republicans said they wanted, including me, were in that bill. Conversely, President Trump said he wanted to actually deal with 1.8 million Dreamers and DACA kids, give them a path to legal status. And he said that in the State of the Union. This bill would have done that, and he supported this. This bill also would have stopped families from being separated at the border. This bill hit all 4 of those areas, and we got 0 Democrats voting for it, and not nearly enough Republicans voted for it, and it failed. That, to me, was the epitome of bipartisan compromise and the potential for bipartisan compromise that got nothing because of the polarization of this issue. And the only people that it hurts are those who are engaged in this and involved in immigration right now. It hurts them the most.
You've used the word structure a couple times. Do you mean a wall?
Yeah, I mean, yes, there's got to be a physical wall along portions of the southern border in the United States. And there already are. You know, I visited the border in Southern California just last month and saw where they're actually replacing sections of the wall that is rusted out with new sections. And many Democrats who demagogue the president for proposing a border structure, a wall in many places, voted for funding to make that happen. And it's happening right now. So that's why this issue's been hijacked rather than using common sense. A wall is being rebuilt right now in Southern California. I witnessed it. I also went underground in some of the tunnels that exist. The drug dealers dig under the existing wall to run drugs, invest millions of dollars in these tunnels that our Customs and Border Protection personnel have to hunt and ferret out in a very dangerous way. We've got to do something, but there are portions of the southern border that you can't build a physical structure. Right. But we've got to have surveillance. We've got to have the ability to have a protected environment there too, not just for illegal immigration, but for drug interdiction.
Okay. Talk to us broadly about who you accept campaign contributions from.
Accept campaign contributions from a wide variety of supporters and organizations made up of many of my constituents that want to invest in the political process. As we know, as you can tell, each campaign year, running for office is extremely expensive. And to be able to do that, you have to go out and ask your constituents to be able to invest in your campaign and to be able to have the resources necessary to break through the politically polarized environment and get a message out. And I think our messaging that we've put forth in this campaign has talked about what I have done as a member of Congress to address many of the issues that we've discussed around this table over the last 5.5 years, be it in investing in healthcare research for families like the Rockfords. We've invested historic amounts of dollars in ALS research and pediatric cancer research, be it with the Wade family, who was part of our commercials in 2016. And we also have talked about investing in vocational education. Really happy AJ, who from Salvaggio Steel was most recently the star in one of our commercials, because it's imperative that we help the next generation of our blue-collar workforce understand that there are really good paying jobs and being able to use your hands in this country.
Are there any contributions you would refuse, or my person or organization?
Oh, we've refused contributions from individuals and organizations before. I just don't make a big deal out of it.
Okay. How would you rate the?
Could you give us an idea of the parameter? Like what would cause you to refuse a contribution?
Yeah, if somebody's been a convicted felon.
Any others?
Most organizations that I would refuse contributions from probably aren't going to give to me in the first place. I would refuse contributions from Planned Parenthood because I have a distinct philosophical disagreement with what their agenda is.
Mm-hmm.
How would you rate the job that Donald Trump has done as president?
Well, I think there are areas that the Trump presidency has done very well, especially when it comes to the economy. In the midst of constant social media and in instant access to the 24-hour news cycle about issues that aren't relative to policy making, I believe we work together with this administration to help encourage the historic economic growth that we have, the historic low unemployment. I don't condone or support every single tweet that comes out of the president or out of the administration, but I certainly don't support any administration or anyone in Washington 100% of the time. And plenty of examples where I broke with party ranks to support the last administration. But I also think that this administration doesn't get enough credit for what they are doing to ensure that we allow families who have been stuck in the cycle of poverty to go out and get a job to lift themselves and lift their families out of poverty because of the historic economic growth and low unemployment.
Kind of following that, I read a recent article in the Panagraph from Bloomington where you said, "I clearly support the president and his policies, and when I disagree with this president, I am not shy about putting those disagreements out there." What are some areas, can you give us some examples of where you have disagreed with him?
Well, the administration clearly knows my stance on retaliatory tariffs. That's an area that they know that I'm concerned about. I've had discussions with Secretary Perdue and his office and also the administration. But I'm also not shy about telling the administration where I agree with them. As a matter of fact, I was glad that I was able to go to the visit the president had. His first visit to Illinois since becoming president was not in Chicago to raise money, was in Granite City, Illinois to talk about blue-collar workers getting their jobs back. That's exactly what this president campaigned on. That's why you saw many blue-collar workers who for years have voted Democrat in this country turn and support this president in the election. They're your readers. They're the viewers that watch the media here in this area. And they're the difference makers in states like Wisconsin, states like Ohio, states like Michigan and Pennsylvania that gave this president the victory. And for the president to recognize that his promise that he made to address steel dumping in this country was realized with job returns and job growth, for him to come and tout that in Granite City, I think was something that I needed to be at. And as a matter of fact, while I was there, I got a chance to talk to his daughter, Ivanka, when we were backstage. We talked about workforce development issues and how we have some of the best workforce training programs in the world right here in Central Illinois. And I invited her back. Little did I know, a couple days later, I get a call in my office that she was willing to come back 2 weeks later. And we worked out, based on her travel schedule, a visit to Lewis and Clark Community College, where we had a roundtable on workforce development. And it was a roundtable that had representatives of the college, students who were taking advantage of those programs, companies that were looking to hire more people, and our own Brad Shivey, local laborers from the local laborers here in Springfield. And Brad, Ivanka was amazed at Brad's testimony that he gave, because he talked about how, he doesn't have a college degree. He joined the military, but because of apprentice programs, he was able he was able to make a success out of himself, and he sees that happen every single day within the union that he runs here in Central Illinois. It's discussions like that that I think give the next generation of laborers, of that blue-collar workforce that we need, the opportunity to understand that you can use your hands and get paid really well for it. As a matter of fact, Lewis and Clark is the most up-to-date community college training program in the nation when it comes to welding and virtual reality welding tools. As a matter of fact, Ivanka put on the welding mask and did a virtual reality weld. I did too. She did better than me. But that welding center would not have happened without an investment from a former blue-collar worker in the Metro East who saved up and wanted to give $3.5 million to the community college to help train the next generation of welders. Lewis and Clark invested another $1 million, and the most up-to-date virtual reality welding training center exists in my district in Central Illinois. And to be able to bring Ivanka Trump to highlight that, I think was something that shows that this administration's priorities are America's priorities.
Doubling back to the original question, though, are there any issues other than you mentioned retaliatory tariffs? Are there any other areas where you've disagreed with the president and the administration?
Yeah, I've disagreed with the president and the administration on some of the attacks on our labor unions. I've disagreed with the president when it comes to rolling back an increase that's been planned for federal employees. You know, I think this is why I've always stood up for what I believed in, regardless of whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. There are things that I said I was going to do when I first ran for this office, like stand up for the men and women who work in our trades and labor movement in this state and in this country, which is why I've been endorsed by over 11 labor unions that traditionally don't endorse many Republicans.
Civility in politics is something I've heard you talk a lot about, and it's arguable the president often does not speak or tweet in civil terms. Is that ever something you've discussed with him?
Well, I've just certainly made that known via the media. It's something we don't have to discuss on a face-to-face level. It's something that I make known every time I'm asked, and clearly, anytime the president tweets something, I get asked by news media outlets like yours. So it's something that we're going to continue to be asked about. But I sat in this room a month ago and talked about that we've got to have civility on both sides. When I cast a vote to change our existing healthcare system to what I think is a more affordable, accessible system that protects pre-existing condition coverage, little did I know when I cast that vote that a few weeks later I'd have a crazed gunman from Illinois come and start firing at me and my friends on a baseball field in suburban Virginia. You know, it's not widely reported, but one of the staffers who was out in the outfield heard him say healthcare as he was firing at us. That's the end result of this heated rhetoric that we have coming from all sides and in and outside of Washington, D.C. And I criticize anyone, including the president, when I don't think that we have a civil discourse and a civil discussion in this country. I don't want anyone, even those who disagree with me, to have to go through what me and my friends and the innocent people in that park that morning went through. Just because we have political disagreements doesn't mean that you can settle those disagreements with bullets on a baseball field. I've seen the end result of this heated rhetoric. I don't want anyone to see that and to experience what I did.
But you don't think, I mean, the president has arguably the largest bully pulpit in the world, given by his nature of his position. You don't think he has more responsibility for reining back in some of the comments he's made, again, either speaking or through Twitter?
Well, I guess I would ask you, do you think the president touting our health care reform bill made this crazed gunman come fire at us? Or do you think maybe he might have been inspired by some of the rhetoric coming from the other side, from people like Nancy Pelosi and Bernie Sanders that said Republicans are trying to kill people with their policy changes? Who would you blame the most for energizing that madman to come do what he did to us that day?
On the same topic of civility, you had a now former campaign worker show up at a private campaign event for your opponent, Betsy Dirksen-Lonergan, and get into an altercation there. He was arrested. Just want to clarify, did anyone on your campaign know he was attending that event?
Nobody sent him to that event. Anyone on my campaign, absolutely not.
Okay, and did you said you called Betsy Dirksen-Lonergan?
I did. I called her. I said that's not the type of behavior that my campaign accepts. Sorry, blame stops with me and anybody in my organization. But I did what any employer would do when you find out that you had an employee break many rules. And we fired him immediately. As a matter of fact, my campaign manager fired him before he even told me about, what the extent of what happened was.
Okay, just to clarify that, you said anyone who breaks the rules, so it was very clear in your campaign this was not something
Yes.
you would. Okay.
Yeah, not the behavior that we saw in that videotape was clearly a violation of anything my campaign would tolerate.
Okay, fair enough. Your constituent also has called you out for not holding town hall meetings. She has told us that she's done 14 in the district within the past several weeks. I just want to give you a chance to explain to our readers and viewers why you do not feel holding town hall meetings
Sure.
is productive.
You all around this table know that I'm willing to accept any invitation to talk about any issue with you or with anyone. As a matter of fact, I was one who actually, during the healthcare debate, accepted your invitation to hold a bipartisan event with Senator Durbin that was going to be led by the State Journal. We ended up having a bipartisan event. It was the Saturday after the Congressional shooting out at a church on the east side. Senator Durbin and me, we talked about where we agreed and where we disagreed when it came to healthcare policy. To me, I find it a lot more productive to hold the 31 open office hours that I've held. I don't just hold open events. I don't just hold open events during the campaign year. We do it every month of every year that I've served. And it gives people a chance, those who agree with me, those who disagree with me, but even more importantly, it gives those who have a problem with the federal government the opportunity to sit down and get help, rather than come in a politically charged environment that can sometimes be hijacked by partisan politics of either side. This is an issue and a question that I got when my friend Jimmy Panetta was here with me out at Lincoln Land Community College. And I offered the same issue, the same response. And I would argue I've spent more hours sitting down with people who agree and in most cases, in some areas, disagree with me than I would have spent doing events that become sometimes politically charged. And Jimmy came to my defense. Jimmy immediately said, I think what Rodney does is most productive because you can get your point across, have a discussion and a debate, and ask even more questions about my policy stances in an event like I hold versus one that could be hijacked by both political ends of the spectrum. So I'm proud that Jimmy agreed with me and who's a Democrat who's serving with me now. And I'm also proud of what we do to remain accessible. And I think everyone around this table, including those who are sitting off to the side, can not argue my accessibility when it comes to answering any and all questions from the media or anyone who wants to talk.
Okay. As we've been discussing, civility in politics is good, so we ask you, what is something you admire about your opponent, Betsy Dirksen-Lonergan?
The fact that she's running. I mean, it takes a lot to be able to step up and run for office. That's something that you have to admire about anyone willing to take on the challenge. And she truly believes in her policy stances. That you can't criticize anybody for that. While I disagree with many of those, and many of my constituents agree or disagree with many of those, it's up to us to go out and talk about what we're going to do as a member of Congress. And you've got to commend anyone willing to stand up and talk about where they believe they can lead this country. I know I had to do it the first time I ran. And it was a lot different experience being a candidate for the first time than it was running for re-election. Because you then can, in my case, I have to come back and explain what I promised I was going to do versus what we've actually accomplished. where we've succeeded and where we haven't yet. And when you haven't succeeded in some areas, that leaves you open to criticism. And that's frankly what our system's all about. And that's okay. Because being able to stand in front of voters every 2 years, like our forefathers envisioned in our Constitution, like we have to do in the House of Representatives, I'm okay with that. I have a job interview every other November in front of 700,000 employers. And the outcome will take place on election night. And I've been blessed to be able to serve for 5.5 years the constituents of Central and Southwestern Illinois. I believe we've had many successes addressing many local issues and many national issues. And I certainly believe with our record that we're going to remain victorious this election cycle too.
Okay, well, we thank you for meeting with us today and invite you to give a brief closing statement as to why you should continue to be the congressional representative for the 13th District.
Well, first off, thank you. I again appreciate the opportunity to be here and appreciate the opportunity to have the open discussion that we continue to have with your outlet and the outlets and my constituents throughout this district. This is an opportunity for me to remind the voters once again of the 13th District that I pledge to you to be a bipartisan member of Congress who is not always going to be out into the 24-hour news cycle. But I pledge that I was going to actually get things done in Washington, be it the Hire More Heroes Act, be it historic tax reform, be it historic investments in infrastructure investment through our highway bills, through our spending packages, and historic investments in water infrastructure, rolling back the regulatory environment to encourage what we see as historic economic growth and historic low unemployment at 3.9%. We've achieved many of those goals that I set out to achieve 5.5 years ago, but there's still much more to do. And that's why I'm asking for your vote. I'm appreciative of the opportunity that you've given me. And please, please feel free to reach out to me if there's any issues that you would like to discuss. But come November, we need your vote to continue the progress that we've made over the last 5.5 years together.